The world recognizes Gladys Knight as the Empress of Soul, a dominant singer whose voice has moved millions. With more than 6 decades in the music business, she treated us to immortal classics such as Midnight Train to Georgia and Neither One of Us. She was not merely a singer, she was a storyteller, injecting unadulterated emotion into every performance. But behind all the glory and success, life has not always been a bed of roses for her. Behind the glamour, she's experienced heartbreak, money troubles, and inner struggles that few fans are aware of. Now, as she reaches her 80s, events have taken an unexpected turn. Her present predicament has raised many questions in people's minds. What actually happened to the iconic songstress? Early life and career. Gladys Maria Knight, born on May 28, 1944 in Atlanta, Georgia, demonstrated great musical ability from an early age. At the age of only 7, she demonstrated her singing ability by winning the grand prize on the original Amateur Hour in 1952, a nationally broadcast talent show. This early success not only served to emphasize her natural ability, but also paved the way for her future as a musician. In September of the same year, on a family gathering held on September 4, 1952, a spontaneous performance prompted them to establish a musical band. Gladys's original lineup featured her brother Merrill Bubba Knight, her sister Brenda Knight, and cousins Eleanor and William Guest. The group named itself the Pips, based on the nickname for their cousin and manager James Pip Woods. This familial ensemble began performing at local churches and events, quickly gaining attention for their harmonious sound and captivating performances. In the mid-1950s, the Pips expanded their reach by performing on the Chitlin Circuit, a network of venues in the southeastern United States that provided performance opportunities for African American artists during segregation. This experience honed their skills and exposed them to a broader audience. Their perseverance and increasing popularity culminated in a recording contract with Brunswick Records in 1957. On this label, they recorded 2 singles, neither of which became particularly commercially successful. Belying these failures, the band stayed strong, going on to play and hone their skills. By 1959, the group's membership had transformed. Brenda Knight and Eleanor Guest departed to form families. They were joined by another cousin, Edward Patton, and a pal, Langston George. This new formation introduced a different dynamic into the group, and they went on to tour relentlessly, opening for major acts like Jackie Wilson and Sam Cooke. The group's perseverance at this point set them up for later achievements. Looking back on these early years, Gladys Knight has frequently spoken about the significance of family and religion in their path. In interviews, she spoke of how their mother, Elizabeth Knight, was instrumental in supporting and encouraging their musical pursuits. This strong family support, along with their combined talent, allowed them to overcome the obstacles of the music industry at a time of great social and racial divides. The early careers of Gladys Knight and the Pips are not only evidence of their resilience and commitment, but also reflect the deep cultural and musical heritage from which they originated. The rise to stardom. During the mid-1960s, Gladys Knight and the Pips were working to leave their mark on the music world. They had already spent several years playing at small clubs, honing their harmonies and stage presence. Their break came in 1966 when they signed with Motown Records, the dominant label that had started the careers of such artists as Stevie Wonder, The Supremes, and The Temptations. Yet, even though they were talented and worked hard, the group felt neglected. Gladys Knight explained in later interviews that, although Motown did much to bring black artists into the mainstream, she and her group were relegated to the background relative to other performers. While at Motown, they collaborated with legendary producer Norman Whitfield, who was famous for creating the Motown sound. Under his production, the group produced several singles that reflected their smooth but strong vocals. Later, in 1967, they recorded I Heard It Through the Grapevine. The song turned out to be their first big hit, going to number 2 on the Billboard Pop chart and number 1 on the R&B chart. Though they were a hit, their version of the song was quickly eclipsed when Marvin Gaye came out with his version in 1968, which shot to number 1 on both lists and ranks as one of Motown's most enduring songs. Although the group appreciated the success, they were keen to sign with a label where they would not have to fight for attention. Gladys Knight believed Motown favored the Supremes and the Temptations, leaving her group with less opportunity. Knight once stated in an interview, "We were part of the Motown family, but we were like the cousins that got invited to the picnic but didn't get the biggest piece of chicken." By the early 1970s, Gladys Knight and the Pips had established a good name, but they desired more creative freedom and fiscal security. Their Motown contract did not allow them the artistic control they wanted, so in 1973 they took a bold but necessary step. They defected from Motown and signed with Buddha Records. This was a bold action given how dominant Motown was back then, but it turned out to be one of the best career moves they ever made. At Buddha Records, the band collaborated with songwriters Jim Weatherly and Tony Camillo and producer Kenny Kerner. They were free to choose songs that best expressed their feelings and experiences. Then, lightning struck. They released the now legendary song Midnight Train to Georgia in 1973. The track was initially titled Midnight Plane to Houston, but Gladys proposed that they change it so that it sounds more soulful and universal. The move paid off. The track was a giant hit, gracing the Billboard Hot 100 and winning a Grammy Award for Best R&B Vocal Performance by a Group. The song is among the most cherished soul songs ever. Following the success of Midnight Train to Georgia, the group's winning streak persisted. During the 1970s, they churned out hit after hit such as Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me, I've Got to Use My Imagination, on and on. Their phenomenal success resulted in 7 Grammy Awards during their career. Gladys Knight and the Pips became one of the greatest and most loved R&B acts of all time. Their songs were not all about love and heartbreak. Yes, those were there too, but about survival, strength, and the harsh realities of life. In interviews, Gladys has discussed how she and her team had to struggle for their position in the business. "We weren't handed anything," she said. "We worked for every single success, and I think that's why we lasted so long." By the late 1980s, Gladys Knight and the Pips slowed down. The music world was changing, and new artists were dominating the charts. In 1988, after 40 years together, the group officially dissolved. Gladys Knight then started her solo career, showing that she could shine independently. Her solo debut album, Good Woman, 1991, was a hit, boasting hits such as Men and Superwoman, with Patti LaBelle and Dionne Warwick. She went on to release music, appear on TV and in film, and even try her hand at gospel music over the years. Even at her advanced age, Gladys Knight's influence in the industry is still felt. Her rich voice, unrivaled stage presence, and determination have endeared her to many as a true icon. Although she might not be at the center of attention today, her contribution to music cannot be ignored. Love, loss, and heartbreak. Gladys Knight's voice has taken her decades of success, yet behind the success, her own life was one of strife, heartache, and strength. She has weathered 4 marriages, financial infidelity, and a struggle with gambling addiction. And through it all, she has maintained a faith that is strong and never allowing hardship to define her. Gladys Knight married for the first time as a young girl. In 1960, she was only 16 years old when she married James "Jimmy" Newman, who was a musician that she cared deeply about. They had 2 children, James III and Kenya. The marriage, however, was far from ideal. Newman struggled with drug addiction, which resulted in a rocky household. Knight discussed in interviews how hard it was to witness a person that she loved fight so intensely. Tragically, Newman left the family, and Knight was left to care for her children on her own while pursuing her burgeoning career. She continued to tour with Gladys Knight and the Pips, balancing motherhood and music with minimal assistance. Newman died in 1973. Even with this tragedy, Knight was still committed to her children and music. But love would find her again, although it came with its own set of problems. In 1974, Gladys Knight wed Barry Hankerson, a music producer and entrepreneur. Hankerson would eventually become famous for managing celebrities such as Toni Braxton and his late niece, Aaliyah. But in this case, he was just beginning to make a name for himself. Their union bore them a single son, Shanga Hankerson, but the situation at home was not rosy. Knight went on to expose that Hankerson was controlling and emotionally aloof. The marriage collapsed, and they embarked on a sad divorce in 1979. Worse yet, Knight found out that Hankerson had purportedly mismanaged millions of her dollars. She was horrified but didn't crumple. Rather, she took what had happened as a lesson. When asked during an interview about her ordeal, she said, "I had to learn how to take care of myself, financially and emotionally. It was a wake-up call," she explained. The money lost was substantial, but it did not shatter her. Rather, Knight doubled her efforts at her career, employing music as her therapy. In addition to her battles, Knight was also embroiled in another fight, a gambling addiction. She has publicly confessed that she spent more than a decade wrestling with a compulsive habit. In an interview, she broke down that her gambling addiction began in Las Vegas, where she would perform regularly. What started as a leisure activity soon turned into an obsession. She spent hours at casinos, losing thousands of dollars at one time. She confessed that at one stage, "I was gambling so much that I didn't even realize how deep in it I was." Knight's addiction worsened during the 1980s, particularly as she struggled with the aftermath of her divorce from Hankerson. It was her refuge from stress, but soon enough, she knew that she needed to change. Gladys Knight attributes her faith in God for saving her from gambling. She prayed, reflected on herself, and sought help from loved ones. With the assistance of Gamblers Anonymous and her church, she was able to overcome her addiction. By the 1990s, she had recovered the reins of her life. She later recounted, "God pulled me out of it. I had to surrender and trust that He had a better plan for me." Knight's struggle with gambling was deeply personal, but she never allowed it to define her. Rather, she used it as a stepping stone to emerge stronger and wiser. After years of heartache, financial woes, and addiction, Knight fell in love again. She wed Les Brown, a motivational speaker, in 1995, but the marriage only lasted 2 years. Although the breakup was friendly, Knight conceded that they had different plans for their futures. In 2001, Knight finally settled on a long-lasting love with William McDowell, a business consultant. In contrast to all her other marriages, this marriage has endured. The couple has been married for more than 2 decades, and Knight tends to credit McDowell with adding stability and contentment to her life. Financial struggles and legal issues. Gladys Knight's success on the music charts brought her fortune and fame, yet financial struggles still crept into her life. Even with making millions during her career spanning decades, Knight had legal woes and financial misfortunes, some initiated by those closest to her. One of the largest came at the hands of her son, Shanga Hankerson, whose handling of her chain of soul food restaurants led to a high-profile lawsuit and criminal indictment. In 1999, Knight joined forces with her son, Shanga Hankerson, to launch Gladys Knight's Chicken and Waffles, a chain of restaurants based on Southern food. The venture began in Atlanta, Georgia, and soon became a huge success, attracting locals and tourists alike. Fans were willing to try soul food made famous by a soul music legend. The eatery served traditional Southern fare such as fried chicken, collard greens, mac and cheese, and waffles, of course. With Gladys Knight's name, the business prospered, branching out to numerous locations in Georgia. For decades, it appeared that the company was headed for greatness. Celebrities and politicians frequented it, and it was a place to go in Atlanta. But behind the scenes, there was trouble. Despite the restaurant's popularity, financial issues started to emerge. Later reports confirmed that Shanga Hankerson had been mishandling money, resulting in extreme financial uncertainty. By 2016, things got completely out of hand. The Georgia Department of Revenue initiated an investigation, where a big fraud scandal was uncovered. Official reports claimed that Hankerson had over $650,000 in state taxes unpaid, resulting in theft and fraud allegations. State investigators accused Hankerson of using restaurant funds for his gain rather than paying employees and taxes. Astonishingly, he had reportedly spent business money on expensive vacations, luxury vehicles, and parties. As the economic crisis worsened, workers remained unpaid, suppliers were owed thousands, and certain restaurant sites had to close down. Clients started complaining of ineffective services, reduced food quality, and unhygienic conditions, further tarnishing the brand image. When the news of the fraud scandal emerged, Gladys Knight was devastated. She had trusted her son to run the business responsibly, but he had tarnished her name and risked employees' livelihoods instead. In June 2016, Knight sued Shanga Hankerson, and brought a lawsuit requesting her name to be removed from the restaurant chain. She claimed that she had no part in the business's financial transactions and wanted to dissociate herself with the scandal. Knight's lawyers issued a statement insisting that she was not responsible for the restaurant's debts or financial mismanagement, and that she had only placed her name on the brand in a gesture of goodwill to her son's business. By July 2016, officials raided the restaurant's locations, closing down operations temporarily. Hankerson was arrested and charged with theft and tax evasion. The restaurant chain never regained its footing from the scandal, and all locations ultimately closed. The legal woes for Hankerson didn't conclude with his arrest. After years of court proceedings and investigations, he eventually pleaded guilty to fraud charges in July 2021. In October 2021, a federal judge sentenced Hankerson to 2 years behind bars and instructed him to pay more than $1 million in restitution to the pilfered tax funds. The court held that his actions harmed employees, customers, and the state, with him being fully liable for covering the debts. Despite the financial betrayal, Gladys Knight was heartbroken but hopeful for her son's future. She never publicly disowned him, but let it be known that she did not approve of his actions. During a rare public comment about the case, she said, "I love my son, but he has to face the consequences of his actions." She also spoke about the pain of seeing her name involved in such a scandal, saying, "I've worked my whole life to build a reputation of honesty and integrity. This was never supposed to happen." Even though the restaurant was closed, Knight's reputation stayed intact. She went back to concentrating on her musical career, philanthropy, and personal life, not willing to let this failure define her. Since Gladys Knight's Chicken and Waffles closed its doors,
in the clear on this, but this restaurant is closed.
Knight has struggled diligently to salvage her public image and distance herself from the debacle. She persisted in touring, releasing music, and appearing on television. Regarding Shanga Hankerson, he served out his prison time and was released in 2023. He has stayed out of the limelight since his release, with no word publicly as to his plans finding strength in religion. For Gladys Knight, religion has been a guiding principle, but not until 1997 did she discover what she referred to as her true spiritual home. Having spent years trying to find meaning in her existence, the Empress of Soul turned to Mormonism, a choice that shocked some of her most devoted fans. Her new faith assisted her in winning some of her greatest fights, such as a gambling addiction, personal tragedies, and the weight of fame. Gladys Knight was raised in a religious Baptist home in Atlanta, Georgia. Faith was something her family highly regarded, and she frequently referred to the role of gospel music and prayer in her life. But as she made her way through fame, turmoil, and heartache, she began looking for meaning. Her journey to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS Church, started in the 1990s, which was a stormy time in her life. Knight had already experienced several failed marriages, financial problems, and the heartbreaking death of her mother, Elizabeth Knight, in 1997. She felt lost and spiritually depleted, although she still had faith in God. All of this changed when her third husband, Les Brown, brought her to the teachings of the LDS Church. Although their marriage was short-lived and ended in divorce, the seeds of faith had already been planted. Knight was greatly affected by the values, community, and teachings of the church, and she soon chose to fully embrace Mormonism. In 1997, Gladys Knight was baptized into the LDS Church, which was a turning point in her life. She would regularly refer to this experience as one of the most powerful moments she had ever experienced. In interviews, Knight explained that her faith brought her clarity, peace, and a renewed sense of purpose. Soon after her baptism, she wed William McDowell, a like-minded LDS member who shared the same faith and values. The relationship was a pillar of strength, and both committed themselves to service, music, and faith-oriented programs. Knight has continuously stated that her conversion wasn't about religion, it was about change. She once remarked, "I thought I had it all together, but discovering the gospel transformed my life in ways I never anticipated. It brought me peace, guidance, and a closer relationship with God. One of the most personal battles Knight has publicly spoken about is her gambling addiction. Although she had been a responsible and disciplined artist throughout her professional life, gambling became one of her main vices in the 1980s and 1990s. Knight confessed that she spent countless hours at casinos, at times gambling all night, not being able to resist her need to continue playing. She lost sizable amounts of money and was often ashamed of how it impacted her financial and personal life. She explained gambling as a trap that gradually engulfed her, leaving her empty and restless. But it wasn't until she became a member of the LDS Church that she was able to escape. Knight attributed her faith, prayer, and the teachings of the Church for saving her from her addiction. She once said in an interview, "I woke up one day and knew that gambling had taken over my life. I prayed that God would take the urge from me, and He did." With the help of her family, church community, and husband, Knight left gambling behind and never looked back. Knight's conversion to Mormonism was received with mixed reactions. Black fans and members of the Black community questioned her decision, as the LDS Church had a turbulent history when it came to race. Black men were excluded from priesthood offices in the church for many years, a policy that was only reversed in 1978. But Knight was unwavering in her faith, saying that she had never personally seen discrimination in the church. She said that her relationship with God was the most significant thing, and that she had discovered a community that welcomed her with love and kindness. She spoke about the criticism in an interview, saying, "People have asked me why I chose this path, but my answer is simple. It's where I found peace. We all have to walk our spiritual journeys." As Gladys Knight nears 80, religion is still at the forefront of her life. She spends most of her time giving back, working on charity projects, mentoring young artists, and remaining active in her church community. She and her husband, William McDowell, have also been engaged in humanitarian work, especially in their hometown. They established the Enlighten Initiative, which is concerned with education, youth development, and faith-based community programs. The truth about her life now. In August 2018, the music community lost Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, who died of pancreatic cancer. Gladys Knight was in attendance at Franklin's funeral in Detroit, Michigan on August 31, 2018. At an interview during the service, Knight said something that caused widespread alarm. She said that she and Franklin had the same disease, causing many to think that Knight also had pancreatic cancer. The media soon latched onto this comment, and rumors of Knight's health circulated widely. But hours later, Knight's publicist released a clarification. Knight did not have pancreatic cancer, the statement said. Rather, she was talking about a past experience with stage 1 breast cancer, which she had successfully treated and beaten. This clarification brought relief to fans, but also underscored the strong public interest in her health. Throughout her distinguished career, Gladys Knight has remained somewhat private regarding her personal life, particularly with regards to health issues. The 2018 episode highlighted her need to keep such issues from the public eye. In interviews after the clarification, Knight highlighted the value of faith, family, and a good attitude in staying healthy. She attributed her recovery to her strong spiritual convictions and the support of her loved ones. Although there have been rumors here and there, Knight has not made any official statements regarding serious health problems since the clarification in 2018. She still performs, although not as often as during her prime years, and is still actively involved in all charitable activities. Since the 2018 episode, Gladys Knight has remained in selective public exposure and performing situations. She performed the national anthem at Super Bowl LIII in Atlanta in 2019, singing a strong rendition that met with universal acclaim. Her rendition proved that her singing talent was still formidable, even though she was drawing towards her mid-70s. Knight has also engaged in humanitarian work, including education and community development. Along with her husband, William McDowell, they have been integral to several charities, such as the rebuilding of a community center in her birthplace, Atlanta. These works are a manifestation of her wish to give back to the world that helped pave her way to fame. With her lowered number of public outings and the process of natural aging, fans sometimes get concerned about Gladys Knight's health. Social media tend to present topics and questions about her health. Nevertheless, it is necessary to pay attention to the fact that, just like everybody else, Knight also deserves privacy concerning her health issues. Empress of Soul. Though she is not quite as ubiquitous in the public spotlight as she was at the height of her career, this change is not necessarily reflective of health problems. Numerous artists will slow down their public activities with age, dedicating more time to private interests, family, and specific projects that are of personal interest. Despite whatever difficulties she has endured, Gladys Knight's story of life is well and truly cemented. Her impact on the music industry, her strength in weathering personal and professional adversity, and her commitment to charitable work continue to inspire fans around the globe. During interviews, Knight frequently talks about the need for gratitude and remaining positive. She credits her strong faith and consistent support of family and fans as the reason behind her sustained success. This way of thinking has certainly contributed to her ability to weather life's ups and downs and a strenuous career. Although Gladys Knight might maintain a lower profile than in her younger days, she is still an energetic and influential artist. Her sporadic performances and public outings still demonstrate her talent and enthusiasm. Her fans can rest assured that, regardless of the rumors or gossip, the Empress of Soul is still living a life of purpose, elegance, and inspiration. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories about your favorite legends. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.